Most crime cases follow a predictable pattern that eventually leads to the culprit's capture. They commit the crime, witness someone come forward, evidence is collected, and usually after some investigation, they're identified and arrested. But there are some cases that take an unexpected turn, and only decades after the fact, progress is made to identify the guilty party. Number 10. On the 18th of July, 1856, a homicide case started in New York City that has not been solved to this day, as the culprit has never been identified. At the time, a man named Bartholomew Burke was working as a porter at a tailor shop on Broadway, owned by Samuel Joyce. That morning, Joyce's employees arrived at the second-floor shop as per normal, but they immediately knew something was wrong when they found the front door locked. Since Burke slept in the store, he would always wake up in time to unlock the doors before the employees arrived, but that morning, this was not the case. They became even more alarmed when they noticed biological material on the doorknob, and rather than force the door open, they decided to contact the authorities. The shop's clerk left on foot and tracked down a police officer who immediately traveled to the store. He also became suspicious when he saw the biological material, and without missing a beat, he kicked the door down. Inside, he and Joyce's workers came upon a grisly scene. The shop was covered in biological material, and close to one of the wash basins, they found Burke deceased. He was lying on his back, undressed, with his fists tightly balled, and had been attacked with a sharp blade. He'd also been hit over the head with a heavy object, like a pressing iron that was found lying near his remains. The blade, a sword, was found on Burke's bed, next to its scabbard, and strangely, it was wrapped up in cloth. The police hypothesized that Burke tried to fight back with a pair of sheets that was found next to his body, and apparently that he fought back against his attacker, but despite his bravery, he came off second best. Looking at the carnage in the shop, it was suggested that a struggle must have lasted at least 10 minutes or so. Investigators questioned the Cabellos family, who lived upstairs, and quite unbelievably, they stated they hadn't heard anything out of the ordinary the night before. Burke was known as friendly and a very likable man, but he had a penchant for drinking. No one could think of any reason why he would be attacked. At first, it was assumed that he was trying to stop a robbery, but nothing was taken from the shop, and Burke's gold watch was still on his wrist. It seemed as though the case would go unsolved, until witnesses came forward to report a strange twist in the tale. They stated that Burke had been drinking in the building's basement, which had been converted into a saloon, and that he was seen in the company of a strange man that night at around 9:30 p.m. An apple seller would also report that he saw Burke and the man speaking to each other inside the shop at around 11:30 p.m., but she'd never seen the stranger before. She only caught a glimpse of him through the window and didn't recognize him. A man named George Benjamin Hooker reported that he saw Burke and August Reich, an employee at the tailor's, arguing a day or two before the attack, and added that Hooker was clearly upset since he slammed his fist down on one of the counters, though Reich denied this. The bartender at the saloon, William Mars, added that the stranger had refused to pay for his drinks that night, and when he was forced to, he picked up a 16-inch blade that was usually used to slice ham. He then pointed the blade around the saloon in a threatening manner before he left. A $500 reward was offered to anyone who could name the man, who was the only suspect, but no one ever did, and Bartholomew's case remains unsolved. Number 9. Some cases seem completely unsolvable thanks to a lack of evidence and witnesses, and for more than 3 decades, this seemed to be the path that the case involving 36-year-old gold dealer Richard Haywood was taking, until there was a twist that no one saw coming. In 1989, Richard, better known to his friends as Ricky, was living in Southampton, England. There, he owned a gold dealership called Ambience Jewelers, which was situated on Shirley High Street. He lived in an apartment above the dealership, and according to those who knew him, he was extremely careful about security in his apartment and business premises. He'd installed several security cameras and was known to always carry a panic button on his person, leading many people to believe that he feared for his safety for unknown reasons. The 16th of October that year was no different from any other business day at the store, and at around 6:06 p.m., Ricky started closing up for the night. He closed the door's shutters and brought his signage inside, but according to witnesses, a man who looked remarkably like Ricky aided him in bringing the sign in. He finished closing up at around 6:30 and then walked to his apartment via an alleyway. A few moments later, a couple who owned a store a few doors down got into an argument when the wife stated that she'd heard the sound of a firearm being discharged, and her husband told her that she was hearing things because he believed it was a vehicle backfiring. They finished their fight about 5 minutes later, and then drove past the shop as they were heading home. They would later report seeing two men fleeing from the alleyway before jumping into a red car that was parked in front of Ricky's store. Strangely, they never contacted the police until news broke that Ricky was no longer alive. The following morning, Ricky was found deceased in his apartment, having been attacked with at least one firearm at point-blank range. His family told the police that Ricky was in the process of purchasing a property in the New Forest, and that he'd asked his mother to remortgage her house so he could borrow £55,000 from her to seal the deal. He'd also been talking to financial consultants and was known to have met with them that morning. He ended the meeting unimpressed, as he was told there was no certainty that he would receive the needed loan, and he then demanded an answer by the end of the day. The couple who saw the two men fleeing the scene provided the police with descriptions. They stated that the first man stood about 5 foot 8 inches tall, that he was in his 20s with a slim build, and that he was wearing tight-fitting pants with a loose-fitting jacket. The second man appeared to be in his mid-20s, standing about 5 foot 11 inches tall. He had light-colored hair and was dressed in a similar outfit to his companion. It was soon suggested that the attack was carried out by professional hitmen, but this has never been proven. Then, in 2014, the police received an anonymous call from someone with information on Ricky's case. Using this information, which has not been made public due to it being an ongoing investigation, the authorities started making some progress, but they've asked that the tipster contact them again. It's believed that with this new information, Ricky's case will eventually be solved, but the $20,000 reward leading to the culprit's identity being revealed is still on offer, and anyone who believes they can assist the police in closing the case is asked to contact Crime Stoppers at 0800-555-111. Number 8. The FBI had offered a massive $1 million to anyone who can help them bring the person responsible for ending the life of former Assistant U.S. Attorney Thomas Wales to justice. And thanks to a strange twist in the case, this may happen very soon. The case started on the 12th of October, 2001, while Wales was in his house on Hayes Street in the Queen Anne neighborhood of Seattle, Washington. He was sitting at his computer in the house's basement answering emails when someone fired 3 shots from outside. The shots shattered the basement's windows and struck Wales, ending his life where he sat. The culprit seemingly knew what he was doing, as he snuck across the backyard without being seen by security cameras, and as a result, many people believed his life was ended by a hired hitman. Wales was a staunch anti-firearm violence advocate, and hence it's believed that he made some enemies over the years. One man in particular, an airline pilot, had a reason to bear a grudge against him, and he was named as a suspect. Wales prosecuted the pilot after it was discovered that he and a few associates had committed conspiracy and fraud by modifying a military surplus helicopter, which was against regulations. The company in question eventually pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, but the pilot then sued the US government in an effort to recover his legal fees. The case was still ongoing when the attack against Wales was carried out, and the pilot's home was searched. A few pieces of circumstantial evidence were found, but the pilot produced an alibi, saying that he was at his home talking to someone on the phone when the attack took place. While he was not ruled out as a suspect, the pilot could not be arrested due to a lack of concrete evidence. It was then suggested that he'd been set up by the FBI to cover the fact that they botched the investigation. For decades, nothing further was found, but investigators remained adamant that the case would eventually be solved. Then, in January of 2006, the Seattle FBI branch received an envelope containing the name Gidget, and inside they found a letter that provided valuable information on Wales's case. The author stated that he was one of the hitmen who'd been hired by a woman to end Wales's life. He added that he never met the woman since she contacted him by phone, and only after he carried out the hit did he find out the target was an assistant U.S. attorney. The letter was analyzed and was found to have been sent from Las Vegas. It was then discovered that the pilot, who was named as a suspect, had spent time in Las Vegas just 3 days before the letter was mailed. But still, there was no way of proving that he was the author. Number 7. On the 18th of February, 1975, a strange case started to unfold on a highway in Baldock, Hertfordshire, England. Several drivers would later report that they saw a woman hitchhiking along the A1 motorway after it was announced that she'd lost her life that morning. Several other motorists came forward to report that they'd seen the same woman walking in the middle of that same road at around 6:15 a.m. with no shoes on, and that she was then struck by a car. She was found deceased at the scene, and her identity was unknown. When investigators processed the scene, they discovered that the soles of the woman's feet were relatively clean, which suggested that she'd taken her shoes off just moments earlier, since they would have been dirty had she been barefoot for longer. She had no identification with her, no purse, and no notable personal belongings that could help determine her identity. As the case started to go cold, she was dubbed the Baldock Woman and the girl in the Afghan coat due to her attire. She was found dressed in a brown Afghan coat, a brown waistcoat, a blue Chelsea girl blouse, a white blouse with a floral pattern, black jeans, a denim miniskirt, a lace scarf, and tights. She was believed to be between 18 and 25 years old, and a description released by the police read as follows. The woman had light-colored, shoulder-length hair with a slim build. She had hazel eyes, a pierced right ear, and a scar on her right leg. She was also noted as having a wart on her abdomen and left leg, respectively. For the next 35 years, no further information on the mysterious woman could be found, and the person who was driving the car that struck her remained unidentified. But he was wanted by the police for fleeing the scene of an accident. Then in 2010, after a forensic artist created a sketch of the woman, finally some progress was made when David Liversedge came forward to report that he recognized her. He told investigators that he picked her up on London's North Circular while she was hitchhiking in a thunderstorm in 1972. He and his wife put her up for 6 months, after which she left to attend Cambridge University, where she said she was going to study English. She told the couple that she was a French student, and they remembered her name being Odile Ludic, though they weren't certain as to how she pronounced her last name. With this information on hand, the charity named Locate International started investigating the case, and in 2025 they found a newspaper article from November of 1972, which stated that a 20-year-old French student named Odile Ledoux had escaped from a house fire at 143 Sturton Street in Cambridge. The article also mentioned she was studying English at the university, and with this information now being found, investigators have asked anyone who may have known Odile to come forward so that she can formally be identified by calling 03001 021 011. Number 6. The missing person case involving 38-year-old Stephen Rosenblum has left the Ocoee Police Department stumped for decades, but in 2024, they finally had a twist in the case that could help track down the person responsible. In May of 1992, Stephen was living in Ocoee, Florida, but his life hadn't gone as he had hoped. He had a serious drinking problem, which resulted in a struggle to find permanent employment. As a result, he relied on small jobs around town to get by, and by the time of his disappearance, he was working at a local pizza restaurant. His 2 sons and his ex-wife also lived in that area, and he decided to remain in Ocoee so that he could spend as much time as possible with his children. His family also stated that he was incredibly dedicated to his sons, and that he and his ex-wife managed to get along. He was allowed to visit his sons whenever he wanted to, and did so regularly. He also attended as many of their extracurricular activities as he could, and attended family gatherings when his work allowed. The last time that any of his family members saw Stephen was on the 1st of May that year. When he hadn't contacted his sons by the 20th, His ex-wife contacted the police since he normally wouldn't go that long without seeing them, and Stephen was reported as missing. While he always remained in the area, he was known to live at different addresses at different times, so investigators were unsure where to start searching for him. His ex-wife also explained that she'd given Stephen a phone card that he used regularly, but she'd noticed that he hadn't done so for some time, and she became concerned for his well-being. When the police contacted the pizzeria where he worked, they were told that Stephen had not been there for the past 2 weeks, but also hadn't collected his last paycheck. Searches of the area failed to provide authorities with any leads, but on the 4th of June, his car was found in Clendenin, Kanawha County, West Virginia, which is located 800 miles away. The car was found in a very remote and almost inaccessible area, which led investigators to believe that someone had abandoned it there in hopes that it would not be discovered for a long time. This caused even more concern for Stephen's safety. Furthermore, he didn't have any ties to West Virginia, and so he would have no reason to travel there, especially without informing his family. When the car was processed for evidence, its tags were found to have been replaced with stolen ones. It's believed that the culprit in this case is a known criminal, and only time will tell whether he'll be apprehended in his role for Stephen's disappearance and possible homicide. Number 5. Monica Casaberry, the mother of 22-year-old Jamal Singleton, is desperate for answers in her son's case, which started more than a decade ago in 2011. At the time, Jamal, who was living in New York, had a child and was dating a woman in the area. On the 19th of September that year, though, his family's lives would be changed for the worse, forever, thanks to a brazen attack on Jamal that would claim his life, and which would frustrate investigators for years. At around 9:45 p.m. that night, Jamal was visiting his girlfriend in Brooklyn, and at one point he stepped outside, and while standing in front of her house, someone approached him from behind and discharged a firearm, hitting him in the back. When the police arrived at the scene, he had passed away, and investigators immediately got to work trying to identify his attacker. They found surveillance footage from the area, specifically from a house in the neighborhood and a nearby store, and a clearer picture of the crime started to emerge. In the footage, a man could be seen pacing back and forth near the store, and when the owner started to close up for the night, the man could be seen walking onto Green Avenue. He then walked behind a small tree that was planted at a nearby house, clearly trying to hide from someone. Next, Jamal could be seen walking into frame, and as soon as the man spotted him, he emerged from behind the bush. Jamal saw him and tried to get behind 2 vehicles that were parked in the street, but he was unable to evade the attacker, who was then firing at him. The man fled, and Jamal tried to make it back to his girlfriend's house, but as soon as he reached it, he collapsed and passed away. It's known that the attacker fled west on Green Avenue, but was not captured by any other cameras in the area, and his identity remained unknown. Further investigations failed to make any progress in the case, even with Monica's help, and Jamal's case went cold. Monica has since become an anti-firearm activist in hopes that other young people will be dissuaded from using these weapons. But as years passed by, the anguish of losing her son never faded. Police say that the attacker stands about 6 foot 2 inches tall, and that during the crime he was wearing a sweatsuit and a baseball hat. If you recognize this man, you're asked to contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-577-8477 so that justice can be served in Jamal's case. Number 4. 20-year-old Amanda Tuzing, known to her friends as Mandy, seemed to have the world in her hands in the year 2000. She had a very positive outlook on life, according to those who knew her, and was in the midst of planning her wedding with her fiancé, Matthew Irvin, which was set to take place the following year. Matthew was a graduate of Arkansas State University, and at the time was employed as an insurance salesman, while Amanda had dreams of becoming a veterinarian. According to their friends and family, the couple had a wonderful relationship and spent almost all of their free time together. On the 14th of June that year, Amanda was visiting Matthew in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and at around 11:30 p.m., she left his house to start driving home to Dell. Matthew was concerned about her making the trip since a heavy storm had broken out, but Amanda assured him that she would be fine and that she would call him as soon as she made it home. By 1:30 that morning, Matthew became concerned when he'd not received the call, since the trip should have taken Amanda about an hour to complete. He contacted her parents, who informed him that they hadn't seen her either. Matthew and Amanda's father, Ed, started searching for her along Arkansas Highway 18 from each end, and they arranged to meet up at a central point. Matthew then made a distressing discovery. Just outside Monet, he found Amanda's car, a black 1991 Grand Am, and at first he was relieved, as he believed she simply had some engine trouble. But as he approached, he realized the car was empty and that Amanda's keys were still in the ignition. Inside, he found her purse, and when he tried to start the engine, the car started on the first try. He then also realized that the windscreen wipers had stopped halfway down the windscreen when the engine was originally shut off, which he found strange. He searched the immediate area, but he could find no signs of his fiancée. He and Ed met up in Monet, and they contacted the police. Despite several searches by the police and volunteers from the area, as well as flyers being put up by her loved ones, no sign of Amanda could be found. At one point, Matthew became despondent after being accused by members of the public as being responsible for Amanda's disappearance. But the case would soon take a turn when a couple, Trent and Fonda Davis, was driving over the Twin Bridges in Arkansas, 12 miles from the area where Amanda's abandoned Grand Am was discovered. Fonda spotted something in the water, and she asked Trent to turn around so that they could investigate. Trent stopped the car and got out to take a closer look, and just moments later, he started yelling that he'd found a body. He decided to remain there while Fonda traveled home to contact the police. After their arrival, they immediately identified the remains as Amanda's, but they were unable to determine the cause of her passing, as she had no visible injuries. In 2007, the police received a tip from a member of the public who reportedly heard someone talking about Amanda's case, but it remains unknown whether that person was ever tracked down or questioned. Years later, a tipster would contact investigators claiming that someone had left a note in Amanda's coffin that could help solve her case. Her body was exhumed, but no note was found, and the case remains under investigation. Number 3. On the 24th of January, 1986, 41-year-old Pleasant Hill veterinarian Harv Ringheim had remarried after getting a divorce from his first wife, but he still spent time with his daughter, who was 9 years old at the time. He was living in Dublin, Ireland, with his second wife, 29-year-old Keiko, and that day his daughter was due to visit the couple at their home for the weekend. She was dropped off at the house by her mother, and just moments later, a horrific discovery would be made. When Harv's daughter entered the house, he was shocked to find both her father and stepmother deceased. They were found lying on the living room floor, and the police were immediately notified. When the scene was processed, it was discovered that Harv had been attacked with a sharpened blade, but only after his hands had been tied behind his back. Keiko's hands were also bound behind her back using duct tape, and her mouth had been taped shut. It was found that her life had been ended due to strangulation, which made the fact that her head was submerged in a bucket of water all the more perplexing. It was assumed that the couple had been attacked by more than one person, and investigators started trying to establish their last known movements. It was revealed that Harv and Keiko had been on a ski trip and returned to Dublin the previous day to get ready for his daughter's visit. Harv was seen at a car wash in the city at 10 a.m. on the morning of the attack, and the couple's neighbor would report seeing an unidentified man in the couple's yard at about 7:30 a.m. They noticed the man as they were leaving for work, and a composite sketch was created, but it failed to produce any additional leads. DNA samples were collected from the scene, but at the time they were of little use. Delving into their past, investigators learned that Keiko lived with Harv and his then wife in the 1970s, while she was in the country as an exchange student from Japan. She eventually went back home, but returned after the couple's divorce, and 9 months before the attack, they got married. No signs of forced entry were found at the house, and it seemed as though nothing was stolen, though their wallets were found empty and a few drawers had been rifled through. The police believed that the culprits were after Keiko, and that Harv arrived home while she was being attacked, though this remains speculation. In a shocking twist, they revealed years later that they believed Kiko's life was ended by hired assassins, though the authorities have declined to share what led them to this conclusion. And then another twist presented itself. In 2011, it was announced, thanks to advancements in technology, that 2 DNA profiles had been identified from the evidence that was collected that day. And it's hoped that with time, the attackers will be identified. A $50,000 reward is on offer to anyone who comes forward with information, leading to the closure of Harv and Kiko's case. And anyone who can aid in the investigation is asked to contact investigators at 510-667-7478. Number 2. The twist in 22-year-old Lucy Hargreaves' case is similar to the one in Harv and Kiko Ringheim's, since it's now believed she may not have been the intended victim, but was likely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the 3rd of August 2003, Lucy was living in Walton in Liverpool, England. She shared an apartment with her boyfriend, Gary Campbell, and her 2-year-old daughter, and on that day she was taking a nap on their living room couch. It's known that at some point that afternoon, 3 men suddenly charged the house, broke in through the door, and proceeded to attack her, ending her life in the process using a large illegal firearm. The attack caused her daughter to wake up and start crying, a noise that would have undoubtedly been heard by the attackers, but it did nothing to stop them from what they did next. They proceeded to pour gasoline around the apartment, up the stairs leading to the upstairs bedrooms, and then set fire to the property. With no other means of escape, Gary grabbed Lucy's daughter and escaped via an upstairs window, still unsure as to what had happened. He carried her daughter to safety and left her with a neighbor, after which he tried to make it back into the apartment to rescue Lucy, but she'd already succumbed to the injuries caused by the initial attack. During the resulting investigation, 21 people were detained and questioned, but they were all ruled out as suspects. Then, someone started contacting men using a phone that was stolen during the attack, and the police have asked for anyone who was contacted to come forward, since they may unwittingly have information pertaining to Lucy's case. It was then announced that the authorities were looking to speak to a man named Kevin Thomas Parle, who was implicated in a tragic case from June 2004. He'd ended the life of a 16-year-old Liam Kelly, and was thought to be involved in the attack on Lucy. In that case, it was discovered that Liam owed Parle £200 after purchasing illegal substances from him, and when he failed to pay, Parle ended his life. He tried to flee but was attacked using a firearm, similar to the one in Lucy's case. He was taken into custody, but while out on bail, he fled overseas. Tony Downs and Kirk Bradley, 2 notorious criminals, were arrested in Lucy's case, and it was then that further details shed some light on the motive for the attack. In 1993, Gary was a passenger in a stolen car that tragically hit a young boy, resulting in his passing. The boy was Downs' brother, and it's believed that he, Bradley, and Parle concocted a plan to get revenge. They stormed the house with those intentions, and finding Lucy asleep downstairs, they had no other option than to end her life. They then set fire to the apartment, hoping that Gary would succumb to the flames, but he managed to make it out alive. But the 2 arrested men were eventually released due to a lack of evidence. They were later rearrested for several other crimes and are currently serving their sentences. Crime Stoppers is offering a £10,000 reward to anyone who can lead the police to Parle's current whereabouts, and anyone with such information is asked to contact the authorities by dialing 999. Number 1. A massive $500,000 reward is being offered for information in the case of 45-year-old Ian Hogg and 67-year-old Frederick Hugh Rawson, whose lives were ended in 2002 at Tweed Heads and Mount Nathan in New South Wales and Queensland, Australia, respectively. Ian was reported missing by his mother on the 12th of March that year, when she was contacted by his employer and informed that he'd failed to show up for his shift. During the investigation into his case, witnesses told the police that they saw a white sedan, possibly a Ford Laser, at his apartment at Sanctuary Lake on the evening of the 10th of March. The next day, Ian's car, a Toyota Celica, was seen in a car park near the Tweed River. Then, 4 days later, on the 14th of March, Hugh was found deceased in his house in Mount Nathan. and it was determined that his life was ended with a firearm. It was also discovered that he'd placed an ad in the Trading Post Classifieds in which he put a 9mm firearm up for sale, and after his life was ended, someone broke into his house and stole that firearm. Witnesses came forward to state that they saw a red Toyota Celica, Hughes' vehicle, being driven by two men who visited him earlier. The car was eventually found on 15th Avenue in Palm Beach, and when it was processed, evidence was found that linked the two cases to each other. It should be noted that Hugh and Ian did not know each other. Despite statements from witnesses and the car being found, both cases soon went cold when no further evidence could be found, and it seemed likely the culprits had gotten away with their crimes. But it is believed that Hughes' life was ended by someone who had their eyes on the firearm that he was selling, though this theory has not been definitively proven. But it is certain that the same people are responsible for the two attacks, thanks to ballistic testing that was carried out. DNA was collected from both crime scenes, and during the years that have passed, DNA profiles have been created and people of interest have been identified, but no arrests have been made due to a lack of evidence, and it would only be in 2024 that more information would be received. A witness in Ian's case came forward to report that they saw him driving his car and that he was being chased by three men in a pursuing vehicle. They were then seen hanging out of the car's windows and yelling threats at Ian, who then tried to flee by driving into an underground car park. The three men were also seen waving weapons around and chasing him, and it seemed like a dire situation. It's believed that he was then attacked by the same group of people the next day, as witnesses stated they saw him with the group before seeing a bright flash and a bang, likely from a firearm being discharged. Anyone who can help in these two cases is asked to contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.